Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for our free webinar, The 13 Ghost Points, Understanding the Mystery of this Alchemical Treatment, featuring Leta Herman. My name is Jeff Bloom, Education Marketing Manager here at Lhasa OMS. For over 40 years, Lhasa OMS has been striving to promote the growth of the acupuncture industry by providing quality products, great prices, and the best customer service, as well as supporting the many schools and continuing education efforts available. With our free webinar series, we intend to provide free educational opportunities taught by some of our industry's most renowned practitioners and educators. I would like to take a moment to acclimate you to the webinar room. To the right of the video screen, you will see 3 tabs: Chat, Questions, and Polls. To chat with other attendees or to communicate any technical difficulties, please use the Chat tab. For questions of our guest speaker, please make sure to use the Questions tab to the right of the chat to assure that we see that at the end of the lecture when we take questions. Please note that each webinar is recorded, and immediately following the conclusion, you will all receive an email with a link to view the video on demand and a copy of the slides. You may always visit our blog and use the free webinar tag to find all of our previously recorded events. From neuroscience to sports acupuncture to Chinese herbs, you'll find something interesting for every practitioner on the Lhasa OMS blog. Now for our featured speaker. Leta Herman is a Chinese medicine instructor and practitioner, co-founder of the Alchemy Learning Center and the Alchemy Healing Center, author, presenter, speaker, and podcast co-host of the Inspired Action podcast. She's a longtime student of Master Jeffrey Yuan and offers a wide range of alchemy treatments and workshops based on the principles of classical Chinese medicine and the 5 elements at her clinic in Massachusetts and on her travels throughout the world. Please join me in welcoming Leta Herman.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled to talk to you about one of my favorite topics of all time, which is alchemy and the 13 ghost points. And today we're really going to try to demystify some of the things that you may have learned in the past or just, not been able to grasp about the 13 ghost points that are often taught in many acupuncture programs, maybe given an hour's amount of time, but not a lot is usually said. And so today is really just to familiarize yourself with this concepts, with the concepts in general, and to see, if that's something you would like to learn. So we're going to review the 13 ghost points in general, talk about alchemy, this type of alchemical treatment, why it might be helpful for your clients, why you would want to do it, how we would do this kind of treatment without time limits. I'm going to explain that when it comes up. How the ghost points can be integrated and used in your practice, a modern day practice, and how the ghost points can benefit you as the practitioner in your own life. And then we'll have some Q&A as well. So as I said, the goal today is to familiarize you with the 13 ghost point method of treatment so you can decide if you want to incorporate that into your practice. But this is only an hour, and we teach this in an apprenticeship program that's a year long. So, more studies recommended if you want to incorporate them. I would recommend that. But as many of you know, the ghost points are widely known. They're not a mystery of what they are. It's how we do the treatments that's sort of mystical in that sense. So just to give you a little overview of my background, which is really different, really unique in terms of the Chinese medicine path, I actually started studying plant spirit medicine over 20 years ago with Elliot Cohen, which led me to doing a lot of intensive Worsley-based 5-element training, and then even a lot of focus on possession treatments. And eventually that led me to the 13 ghost points. And that's how I met Master Jeffrey Yuan back in 2004. And, I studied extensively with him. I did his advanced acupuncture program, traveled all over the world, and we went to China 3 times, and just doing a lot of work with Master Jeffrey Yuan, who really to me was the expert in the ghost points. And so I've been practicing in my clinic for over 20 years, but I'm doing acupressure. I don't use needles. My fingers are like needles. It's not a lot of pressure. It's really energetic, which I'm going to explain a lot later. However, I teach a lot of acupuncturists, mostly acupuncturists, the alchemical techniques. So because what I offer as a teacher is a very practical perspective, I can really teach the theory, but a lot of people get the theory and they don't get how to put that into practice. So I've put in hours and hours of alchemical Chinese medicine practice in my clinic, for the past 20 years. So I'm here to share that experience with you, just to make your path a little easier. So our clinic is the Alchemy Healing Center in Northampton, Massachusetts. We also just founded in 2020 a learning center, the Alchemy Learning Center. We also have an apprenticeship program through that and many online classes. This class, this webinar is an intro to a class we're offering next week on Halloween, October 31st, for those of you who aren't in the US. We're going to do a longer Ghost Point workshop that day. So that you can get to through the Alchemy Learning Center. So we also have a Chinese medicine related podcast called Inspired Action. And that's all about living a Wu Wei life, embracing alchemy, the 5 elements, the 9 palaces. So it's great for anyone in the field, but it's also really good to refer your clients to if you want them to know a little bit more about this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of information there about that. And I also just did an interview yesterday on the Chinese Medicine podcast. So you can check that out. That really is a great interview for anyone who's new to this kind of thing. There we have the Alchemy Learning Center, our online classes, and several books we've written. The most recent we just came out with, Through the Mystery Gate, which is entirely about alchemy. So we have a couple on the 5 elements, a gua sha book, and we published a Tibetan medicine book called Healing Anxiety of a friend of mine named Dr. Mary Ryan. So why alchemy? And what do I mean by that? So alchemy is about freedom and living authentically. That's the core, what we're trying to get to with the treatments. So past trauma hooks into people, and that makes them no longer free. We all know this. I mean, we're dealing with it in our clinics all the time. And the ghost points for what I do are often the first step on the path of alchemy. And so the idea is there's more to life than past suffering. So letting go of the past is freedom. So what is an alchemical treatment? It's any treatment that deeply transforms someone. You could even say transmutation is a better word, because transformation is slow. It's an evolutionary process. Transmutation is magical. It's mystical. It doesn't make sense. You can't scientifically explain transmutation. But it happens in these treatments. Things happen in a short period of time that makes no sense, that someone could shift something that like 20 years of therapy couldn't shift. So that's what we're really looking at in terms of alchemy. So, when we're working with someone with an alchemical, point of view, often the client may have deviated from their destiny, from their authentic path. And so these treatments reorient and realign them to what I like to call their true Qi, their true essence, their true nature. So alchemy, you could think of as, here's the primary channels, which is what most of us are working with. The primary channels is, day-to-day work. Day-to-day work meaning like somebody's got a boo-boo, somebody's got the sniffles, somebody's got an autoimmune illness, somebody is cancer, whatever it is. We're using a lot of the primary channel treatments to treat that. We're putting things back into balance. We're putting things, creating energy flow, chi flow. There's a lot of good stuff we're doing. But alchemy, is deeper than that, deeper change. And it's most like probably what many of you have maybe embraced is the 8 extraordinary vessels. Only that the 8 extraordinary vessels takes a long time. It's a minimum of 3 months for substantial change, whereas a day-long ghost point treatment can be completely transmutational in that one day. So the person might have lifelong lasting change from just that one day. So that's kind of how I look at it. I also do the 8 extraordinary vessels. I love them in certain cases, but I'm kind of a fast person. I'm a little impatient, and if I think that the ghost points is appropriate, I'd much rather choose that and move people along a little faster. So an alchemical practitioner, if you want to embrace that, the reason I really recommend that you need a little bit more training is that you need to become an alchemist yourself. You need to have the same level of self-awareness and self-cultivation that you're trying to cultivate in the client. So anyone can actually do alchemical points because they're actually on the primary channel. So we do them all the time. So if you're doing large intestine 11, you're using it as a primary channel point. So it requires your cultivation of these points to do them as an alchemy practitioner, to become the alchemist. Otherwise, they're just primary channel points. So you stick a needle in the point, it doesn't create that level of change. So this cultivation, is what makes that particular point become the transmutational point, become the transmutational treatment. So that's what I mean by an alchemical practitioner. And so here's a great quote, one of my favorites from Claude Lahr and Elizabeth Rochat de la Vallée, which is, you must have a deep understanding of your own life before pretending to know life in another, especially the disturbances and the development of life in another. So that's what I'm trying to get at, really. It's a great quote. So for you to become an alchemical practitioner, you got to think, is this my path? Is this what I want? Alchemy takes time to learn. It's not fast. It's a journey, but it's not a race. And so you need to be patient with the patient, as well as you need to be patient. And you need to be the patient of the treatment, in meaning that you need to experience your ghost points as well before doing a ghost point treatment. So, whether you have a friend do it or you come to me or one of, the people that have learned this, it's just really important that you have that experience yourself, because what you need to realize is that you will have huge realizations about yourself and the patient. So when you do an alchemical treatment, you go through these things together. You transform as well as the client. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this already doing primary channel treatments or extraordinary vessels. Everyone has an aha moment about themselves treating a client. But when you're doing it as an alchemist, as an alchemical practitioner, the growth in yourself, the evolutionary process of yourself is huge. In other words, you're evolving and transmutating as much as the clients on your table. So for me, that's the reason that I would want to become an alchemical practitioner. And for me, that's what it really has done. It's really catapulted my personal self-cultivation and evolutionary process much faster than had I not been a practitioner of it. So why take the alchemical approach as a client? The alchemy releases the baggage of this lifetime. So it also releases the past life baggage that you may have, or even from your ancestry, because there's, often many of us are carrying up to 5 generations back of trauma. So it frees you up to be your authentic self. So that's the first step. Then alchemy can release the habits of perception. It's almost like we have blinders on all the time. And what would happen if we took those blinders off? Well, for some of us who have a lot of trauma, that's not cool. Like, we need the blinders. But if you release all that trauma and you release the baggage of this lifetime, doing ghost points and some other techniques, then you can take these blinders off and start to see reality for what it is. Basically, not be limited by yourself and how you interact with the world. So that would be the next step in alchemy. And once you're free from your baggage and the limitations of your perception, then you can truly fly in your life. So that's the ultimate goal of alchemy. Not just, ghost points is just a part of alchemy. It's not this whole package that I just outlined just now, but I just wanted you to kind of get the context of where the ghost points fits in. So just a few stories to start us out. First, you can use the ghost points, as a single point. So you don't have to do, we're going to talk today about the ode, the Sun Simiao's ode. There's 13 of those ghost points, but any one of those could be used as a single point. I'm going to, at the end, really talk about a couple that I think would be good for you to experiment with. And so, because they're a little less tumultuous in sort of the digging up or opening Pandora's box is what I like to say. So they're a little bit safer points in that way. And so one of them is Ghost Market, and Ghost Market is Ren 24 on the chin, and it is a cool point. So we're going to talk about that at the end in length, but I wanted to give you a story. So years ago, I used to do an expo, a local expo, kind of New England based expo, and I would do some treatments there. So I would do like, a booth with 20-minute treatments. Not a lot of time. Ghost points take a lot of time, but if you do a single point, you could theoretically do a shorter amount of time. I would do longer than 20 minutes in a clinic. I would probably do 30, 45 minutes if I could, just on that one point. So we're going to explain why we take so much time. But I did the 20-minute treatment with this young woman. She was not really struggling in a deep way, it seemed, but she obviously was, struggling a little bit. I didn't realize how sort of stuck she'd felt because we only met her for 5 minutes. We did the point. A year goes by. I do the expo again the next year. She comes back and she says, "Oh my God, that point completely transformed my life. I left the job I've been stuck in for my whole life. I hated it. I moved to Arizona where I always wanted to live. I'm doing a new career. I love it. And it was all because of this point." And so that was like, wow, like I didn't realize at that point that I could really, make that much change just from such a little bit of the ghost points. So, I wanted you to know that that's a possibility. Now, on the flip side of that, the reverse side of that, also there can be that severe psychosis there. Someone could have something like severe psychosis. I was once asked to go into the psych ward at our local hospital where someone who had, just mysteriously just really entered into a deep level of psychosis. She was pulling things off the walls, taking her clothes off. She needed 24-hour care. They had her in the hospital for evaluation. They didn't know what was wrong with her brain, et cetera, et cetera. They couldn't figure it out. I go in, luckily hospital was fine with that. I go in with my, as I'm going to explain, we play music in treatments, and I start the treatment. 6 hours later, I'm sort of, wondering am I going to get this? Am I going to get this? And suddenly she just literally almost like the light came back into her eyes, and she blurted out like a song had referenced her name. And she said, "That's me." And it was like something in the ghost point. I was working on the ghost points at that time, and something in the ghost points cleared whatever that was, whether you want to call it a ghost or a gwei, a real entity, that may have been likely, whatever it was, that cleared. So that is like another layer or the most extensive sort of level that the ghost points can go to. And that's not going to be your everyday practice, obviously. So let's move on. So years and years ago, when I was just starting out, I only did it with people who were really struggling because I thought, oh, this is for severe cases. So I had a young teen who was kind of scary. He was scaring the teachers. He was scaring, he was had some violence brewing in him. There was some level where, his mother was really frightened. So she brought him in. I think he was like only 13 or 14. And we did the treatment, and everything changed. Whatever that darkness was, it had left him. And just a couple of weeks later, maybe a month later, the mother came in and said, please, I want that treatment. I want to do that. And I said, but there's nothing wrong with you. And she said, no, you don't understand. I think we all have that in us somewhere. I think we all need this treatment. What you did with him, it's like it cleared something, and I want that too. Now, she had actually been a survivor, and she had real things that she knew, were part of her. So I think she was totally founded in that. And I started to broaden my belief system about, these very intense points, and why would pretty much an average person want the ghost points. And she showed me, after I did that work with her, and then now expanding over many years, that there's very few people who've been on the planet about 20 years plus who haven't experienced trauma on some level. It doesn't have to be, you know, sexual abuse or violence. It could be an accident. It could be, you know, bad encounters with toxic people. But pretty much, I meet the occasional 20-year-old who's, you know, fortunate enough not to have had anything like that and doesn't need the ghost points. But, you know, and there's many children, little children who need them, but it's rare that we can be on this planet and not need to clear the baggage that we're carrying. And so she taught me that. That was maybe, I don't know, a long time ago, 15 years ago. So I also like to tell the story of the golfer's elbow, because this is an example of a person who claimed that there was nothing wrong emotionally. He came in and he said, I just have pain in my elbow. So I went to town on it. I wrote the book on gua sha. I could do gua sha. I could do like needle. You know, I don't needle the way you know, acupuncturist needle, but I did all of my tips and tricks and all that stuff, and nothing would touch it. And I kept saying, is there anything else? Is there any other like thing going on in your life? Is there any? And he kept saying, nope, 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 nope. So finally, I just was like, well, I'm just going to do the ghost points, because what else is there? Like I'm at a loss. So I did the ghost points, and one of the ghost points is on the elbow, and it's at the very end. So I went through the whole thing, and I didn't do it in the whole one-day session like I do now. I did it over time, because that would have been really weird for him. And so occasionally I do that with people who like would never come in for a long treatment. And I did that with him. I got to large intestine 11, which is one of those points. And he said, oh yeah, you know, I never told you, but this person embezzled all this money. And not only was this person a friend, this person was like family. And they took, you know, $100,000 or whatever, embezzled all this money from his company. And so it was an amazing story, because all this time, I didn't know that. And at that time, that very time when the golfer's elbow started, she had been on trial to go to jail. So not only is it that he'd been violated, but now he had to watch someone he used to love go to jail. So next day comes back in, no more pain. Never had a golfer's elbow pain again. So how does that work? How, you know, what's that about? Like, you know, obviously there's nothing physical that I was doing differently in that point. The difference was the ghost point. I was doing that point as a ghost point. I'm sure I'd worked with that point a bazillion times, because that's, you know, where the pain was. So that's sort of some stories for you. That's just to get you, whet your appetite for the rest of tonight. Okay. So we're going to just go over the 13 ghost points in general. So what are the ghost points good for? So the character for Gui, which is a ghost in Chinese, has a little hook in it. So the idea with the ghost points is, what's hooked into you? I like to think of it as you're the fish on the hook and you can't get off the hook. You wriggle really hard. Maybe you'd get off the hook, but something haunts you daily. So the key indicator is obsessive thinking. You know, whenever you get someone who's saying, I can't let that go, I'm obsessively thinking about it, you know, think about the ghost points as a treatment. Now, the particular treatment that I focus on is Sun Simiao's version of the ghost points. So he took something that used to, you know, that as a whole, we say there are 20 ghost points, but he took 13 of them and he put them in a specific order. And I never really questioned the order until I started really teaching it, you know, many years ago. But the elegance of this particular order, which I'll talk about at the end tonight, is so beautiful and so amazing, because each one feeds into the next. And it's really like each point is the way you get hooked, the way that something, you know, traumatic gets you. And that's the idea of it. So Sun Simiao, you know, lived between 581 and 618 AD. And he was supposed to be 101 when he died, or transformed into some other, dimension. We don't know. But he is called, because he's supposed to be immortal, he is called the king of medicine. And he's, his likeness is everywhere, in every temple that we visit in China. He's just everywhere. And so by the age of 20, he had mastered and memorized all the medical classics. When he reportedly died, they said his body didn't decay for more than a month, perhaps because he was taking mercury and arsenic and different elixirs to preserve his body. But, again, he's still purported to be immortal himself. So he didn't invent these points, but he just took the wisdom of all of what he had learned and put them in a particular order. He was technically Gohung's student. Now, Gohung is the original alchemist, but they didn't live at the same time. But Gohung's supposed to be immortal too. So who knows, maybe Gohung was around when Sun Simiao was alive. Gohung created elixirs of life. He was the one who really started drinking the mercury and things that are poisonous to most of us. But if you're an alchemist and you drink that, you can survive because you've evolved yourself, you've transmuted yourself. So that's called external alchemy. And they would do that to get rid of ghosts and trauma and things like that as well. But Sun Simiao said, let's not take poisonous things. Let's do it internally. Let's do it through meditation. Let's do it through acupuncture. Let's do it a little differently. So he's really responsible for creating internal alchemy, and in particular, the 13 ghost points. Here's a photo of his house in China that we got to visit on our first trip to China. Just obviously beautiful, beautiful place he lived. This was his door, which is his mountain in China, which is just a little mountain. It's not one of the big mountains. So what do the ghost points treat? Number one, obsessions. So obsessive thinking, OCD, anything like that. Number two, it's really about what I like to say, releasing cellular memory, cellular patterns, emotional patterns in the physical body and in the subconscious and the unconscious. So we have these patterns of thinking that translate somatically into the body, and they get kind of lodged there. So that's how you could think of what the ghost points, I think, fundamentally really treat. But they can also treat things like curses, because a curse is anything that someone says to someone else, and then that person that receives the curse now obsesses about. So it's just another form of obsessive thinking. It also, is treating basically anything that haunts you from the past that's hooked into you. But the important thing to note is that no one will get hooked by trauma unless they have an opening for it. They have to have a mouth to bite that hook. So what does that mean? That means that, if someone is worried and scared about something, they're likely going to be vulnerable to getting hooked, because they'll get hooked in that sort of area of their life. For example, if you go travel, many people are worried about getting parasites on their travels, which is, can happen. It's common. It's the people who are worried about getting the parasites who are more vulnerable to getting it, because that's the opening. The fear is the opening for the hook. So that's the idea. They also say that it clears Xie Qi, evil Qi. So this is the goo, the worms, the possessions by entities or gui. So it can be used for that. I use it a lot for clearing the slate for anything that's like chronic disease, such as chronic Lyme. That's my starting place before I do any treatments for the Lyme itself. Autoimmune diseases, same thing. What's going on that the body is attacking itself? What is the deep emotional block? And most importantly, PTSD, because we all know that trauma that is hooked into someone is going to start to show up everywhere in their current day life. And they often can't, it's a big trigger. They can't see the difference between the current event and the past events. So that's where a lot of really big transformation can happen with PTSD. Okay, so Ghost points can also be used for your growth. So let's say you're not obsessively thinking, you're not really hooked, you don't have a lot of problems, but you can also do them more to really clear like that blank slate of this lifetime. It's really for your personal transformation. Even if you're not traumatized, you might have some emotional baggage. Like I said, it's really hard to be on this planet and not have some emotional baggage. So clear that away before you do your self-cultivation path, before you start your personal evolution. So when someone comes to me and they're just kind of starting out, they're getting into like, all this new agey stuff, then they can do the ghost points to kind of clear out the negative vibrations that are in the body. And so I like to say it's preparation for them to embark on the 9 stages of alchemy, which is what the book we wrote, Through the Mystery Gate, is about, which is a particular set of stages that the immortals like Sun Simiao created to guide people along a particular path of alchemy. It's not the only path. It's just a very wise path that you can begin. But Ghost Points is a great way to start before you start that work. And that's growth into the full potential of yourself. It's really trying to help you fly in your life. The 9 stages of alchemy is a real positive way to look at healing, because you're already perfect. You're born perfect, in fact. Okay, so when is this type of alchemical treatment helpful and why? And I have a couple pictures here from a ceremony that I was so grateful to have seen on Maoshan, where I got to see some of the things that I had been working on in my clinic in action in Chinese, obviously, but to see the ritualized treatment of how it works in a live setting. So this is one of the pictures. Before I go on, I just want to say there are a lot of alchemical treatments that I do. I just wanted to kind of put it into context for you, how the ghost points differ from some of the other treatments. The first thing to sort of identify or diagnose, if you want to use that word, is the person possessed or is the person obsessed? If the person is technically possessed, either by a gui or by their own emotional state, that means to me that their heart is literally walled off, or I like to say there's a cellophane wrapper around it, and they really can't have access to themselves or others. And that is what you could use the ghost points for. They are sort of an all-encompassing set of points, but I prefer, because I started in the Worsley 5-element tradition, the IDs. That's a different treatment, a different alchemical treatment. The IDs can release that block around the heart. The EDs, so it's internal devils or internal dragons, or external devils and external dragons, I like to say is when the will is blocked, when the person can't do anything. Now, the ghost points have points in it as well that can treat a will block. So you can use the ghost points instead of those two if you're not, familiar with the Worsley tradition. But I think they're very targeted and they're just for that thing. So I love them for that reason. The 9 heart pains treatment is from Jeffrey Yuen's tradition, and that one is for self-hatred and addictions. I usually do the ghost points first, even if those are true for the person, and then I follow with the 9 heart pains treatment. The grieving treatment is very important because if someone's really stuck in their grief, the ghost points, might help, and it might even be why they're stuck in their grief, but you need to address the grief directly, and that would be a grieving treatment. There's also Ma Danyang's Starry Sky Points, which is about realigning a person with the stars, basically, with the Big Dipper, the pole star. But that one's a kind of advanced treatment. It's not one we do instead of the ghost points. We would add it on later. The 9 stages of alchemy is, again, something you do afterwards, after you've released the baggage of your lifetime. Then you can begin to do the 9 stages of alchemy. So those are just some of the treatments, not all of them, but that are alchemical, just so you can compare, where the ghost points fits into all of that. So what are the methods of alchemy? What we're trying to do first is clear the Xie Qi, clear the evil Qi, the not true Qi of the person. We're trying to put back into balance what's out of balance. Primary channels is great for that. And then the person can begin that self-cultivation, that 9 stages of alchemy path. So let's look at the ghost points in terms of how the alchemical treatment is actually done. And I like to say without time restraints. So 1 hour is an incredibly short time to completely change someone's life on a deep level. And I know that many of us are trying to do that over time, treating someone maybe weekly or every day or however often they need it. We're trying to evoke that level of change. But the problem with 1 hour, one person said to me recently, you know, this was the first time I have ever in my whole life, and she was a therapist and she'd probably been to a lot of therapy. It's just the first time in my whole life I told my whole story in one sitting. And that in and of itself was magical for her. She felt like it was always done in chunks. And so she could never get anywhere with it. So just to look at the time factor. Timing is everything. Releasing something that's been there for many years, maybe decades, you know, an hour is just too short. In some cases, maybe they've had it for their entire lifetime. So that's where a 1 hour session is just not enough to make the radical change that I love to do in alchemy. Timing, again, the ghost points, you know, you can do them. And many people do them in 1 hour sessions. So if you're going to do that, you'd have to do that over a long period of time, maybe even several months. And so what happens if you do it that way? Well, first of all, it's not going to be quite as effective in that big, like, transformational process all at once. Also, it's going to be very difficult for the person because they have to go home at night, that night, and deal with the processing of what came up, maybe at the very end of the treatment. So you send them out, you know, you did this big, like, open this big Pandora's box and, oh, geez. You open this big Pandora's box and suddenly, you know, they have to now go home and deal with that. Whereas if you're in the clinic with them for a long period of time, it's going to just be really beneficial to have someone to walk through that with them, walk along the path with them in that sort of major stuff that came up. The exception to that is earth elemental people. For those of you who know 5 elements, earth elemental types, these temperaments, they love deep self-realizations and they're not afraid of them. And so they love the aha moment. So spreading it out over maybe months for them, even though it's challenging, they're always up for an emotional challenge. They won't shy away from that. You ask a wood person to do that, they're like, no way, do it in a day. I want out. Like, I don't need the big realization. I just want to change. Earth is like, no, I want to understand myself. I want to know why. I want to know how. So occasionally I do that with particular earth people that I know really want to do that. Okay, so what is a long treatment? I keep referencing, so how much time is enough time? So I like to say within a 4 to 6 hour window, basically I devote a whole day. I may occasionally see someone first thing in the morning, but then the rest of the day, there's no end time. But typically it's 4 to 6 hours. And that's an amount of time. 13 points, if you're going some points, even a whole hour on one point, you know, that's not a lot of time. So, giving people this time is much more effective. Also, think about it. The person is taking time for themselves to do their work. You are providing a sacred space. So this is a really different way for them to perceive their treatment. I mean, it obviously is pretty expensive for the practitioner. So, you know, you're going to charge a lot more money. And so, you know, you're providing this sacred space. They're investing in themselves, and you're truly listening to their entire life story. If that's what they want to do, they could sit there and not talk if that's how the treatment goes. But I often say the heart needs to speak in these treatments. You're not a psychotherapist, but you're definitely going to be listening, probably to some amount of talking. Okay, the next big thing to embrace as an alchemical practitioner, and this really is the number one thing that's different from the standard primary channel treatment. That's not to say that some of you aren't already doing this in your primary channel treatments, but it's called treating from the void. So what is the void? So it's a space or a place that has no desire, no agenda. You're not expecting anything or any outcome. You have no prejudice of anything you already know about the person. You leave that all at the door and you just be with that person. So the void itself is accessible by going into your own heart. So the idea is that the space inside the heart where the blood flows through, that is the void of your own heart. And from there, you can access the void of your patient's heart. From there, you can even access the greater void where the Gui, if you are working with an entity or a ghost, you would encounter there. So that's a very shamanic process that may be way out of your, league at this point, but that's just one aspect of how far we can take this. So when you're in your heart, that's your little Shen. When you're going up to this bigger void, that's the big Shen. That's the Shen we all share, the universal Shen. So that is the void. And then there's a little void inside your heart. So the role of music is very important in these treatments. That's why I was so appreciative to be able to see some of the instruments being played on Mao Shan that time. What I do in a modern day clinic is, ever since the invention of the iPod and the idea that we can shuffle random music, is that I have what I call the divine DJ in my treatments. So that is where you're shuffling music. Now, why is music such a key component? It is actually one of the components of alchemical treatments. Back in the day, they were doing live music, instrumental, they were chanting. These were priests who often did these treatments. So they had that music component. It was very important. And why is that? It evokes emotions. It gets the person stimulated. So something that might be locked in the unconscious starts to release because of these amazing sounds that bring out those emotions. Also, random music, whether it's performed by, musicians or on your, Spotify or whatever, you start to realize that you're being guided. So a really rapid song, a fast song comes on, there might be a very different experience as the practitioner, what's happening right now. And you get in tune with that because music is vibrational. So it's going to intensify the experience on a deep level, or maybe, de-intensify it, but you start to follow it. You start to understand that it's a guide. So that's a big part of the treatments. And so we're starting to use words like shamanic or ritualized, or, you see that this isn't just a regular, treatment. So you need to, as a practitioner, one of the things that you develop as an alchemy practitioner is to pay attention to time and space and other factors. You have to have a heightened awareness, for example, of the 4 directions, of the vertical and horizontal axis, of the first point of the ghost points. You stand facing the south. So you're standing facing fire, which means you're activating your Shen, which is your highest guidance. But your feet are standing in the north. And so in the north, that's the water element, and that's going to be your wisdom. So you have like this Shen, Shen wisdom component, meeting each other. And so just knowing that, just being aware of time and space. Also, how do you know when a point is done? I said, we can take up to an hour on a point. There's no rush. So so paying attention is, oh, now the point's done. The music might tell you that, for example. You also need to know when the treatment has stalled. Maybe it's a bathroom break. Maybe it's time to maybe it really is stalled and you need to insert yourself. One of the things we talk a lot about in the apprenticeship is what it means to insert yourself and how you don't do that in a way that's negatively influencing the treatment. So what is a ritualistic treatment? you know, obviously when the priests are doing it, they have specific things that they're doing over and over again in every treatment. So for us, you know, we might want to create our own rituals. We might want to have a certain robe or different colors in the room. We might want candles or fire. We might want smoke like moxibustion. We might want to do something like walking the steps of you, which is according to the magic square. So you're almost like plotting out the square of the magic square around the table. I'm just giving some examples. You obviously you have the music. You might want chanting. You might want, you know, live music. I'm just saying it's probably not too practical, but you know, that's the space you're going into, and it's a weird space. So anyone who thinks they can remember 13 points easily, try it actually doing it this way, because you won't remember it in the beginning. It's like you go into this weird space when you're in the void, but then eventually it becomes such a ritual. So it took me several years to remember the points, which I knew the points. It's not that I couldn't remember the points, but when I'm doing the treatment, it was difficult to hang on to that order. Now, of course, I do it in my sleep. So let's talk about the technique that's used. The technique is a vibrational technique, and I'm going to talk about a non-needle technique and a needle technique. Now, when you do 8 extraordinary vessels or divergence, those also have vibrational techniques. They're a little different. So, you know, one is very fast, one is slow. We could talk a long time about the different needling techniques, but why vibrational versus, you know, any other kind, lifting and thrusting, circular? We're trying to break up things that are deeply entrenched, stuck emotional patterns, cellular patterns. So the vibrations move it. They shake that person up. They shake something that might have been repressed for a very long time and is buried quite deep. So, you know, in traditional needling, you use silver and gold needles. I know that Lhasa now has gold needles, so I'm thrilled to hear that, because I've spent many days traipsing around China looking for gold needles, so we can now get them here. The gold needles, by the way, were used for the not so much the ghost points, because that is the you know, removing the negative stuff. So that's more of the silver needles, but the gold needles are for when you're really trying to evolve. Then you start using gold needles. But anyway, so all needles are put straight in, not oblique. You take your time before the insertion. So when I say this, I mean you could take up to an hour before you insert the needle. So you might just sit with the needle. If as an acupuncturist, if you want to do it that way, you would sit until the needle slips in. And that's how you know that the opening has come, that the hook is released. So that would be a way to know when the point is done. However, I will say it's difficult to do these treatments with needles. And the reason is one of the points is due 16. You would have to, because you retain the needles, you would have to require that the person be propped up to have all the needles on the front and then that one needle on the back. It's doable. I've seen it done many times, but you also, because you're retaining the needles, you might want a urinal because you don't want to pull them all out and have to put them all back in. So though I teach my acupuncture students to try it and to do it, all of them usually opt to do it my way, which is the non-needle technique. So what is the non-needle technique? I encourage, you know, them to, like I said, try it with the needles, but they usually opt for the non-needle technique. So what you're doing is you're simulating the needling with your finger. You are the needle. You're just basically placing your finger lightly on the point, and your energy goes in as deep as needed. Your finger is not so much vibrating, but the vibration starts to really get intense underneath the surface. So it's like a wave of energy that starts to build. So what are the benefits? The benefits is you can do bilateral points at the same time. Traditionally, you needle left for males first, right for females first, is done in a lot of acupuncture. But if you want to sort of really focus and save time on having to change your position and all that, the bilateral points can sometimes be done at the same time or not. And, you know, the retention of the needles is sort of a psychic retention. You don't really have to go backwards through all the points as you do with needles, which just takes a lot of time. Again, I'm really focusing on time here. Also, doing it as prescribed as closely as possible, simulating these needle techniques, it actually can be a little bit easier without the needle. For example, there's a technique called Fire Mountain, which is a little bit difficult to do. So, we've invented some of the ways that we deal with these, specific ways of needling. The other thing is, when you needle like this, you really need to stand to get that connection between heaven and earth with a needle. Whereas when you're doing the non-needle technique, you can sit. So you can imagine standing for 4 to 6 hours is pretty intense. It's kind of hard. Not to mention, it's very difficult to connect with the person when you're towering over them. So you actually get a better connection with the person if you're sitting next to them than if you're standing. So these are just some reasons why the non-needle technique is good. And any acupuncturist can obviously do the non-needle technique. It's there if you want it. So, and a lot of the people that then learn this then take it into their clinic and do it with the primary channels. You really can do it anytime, as many of you know, but some acupuncturists, really don't use non-needle techniques. And it's not twee knots. It's really about the fingers are the needles. Okay, so the ghost points, it's like you have to decipher the code. You're given a word, like we talked about ghost market earlier, and that's just a code. What does that mean? And you discover the mystery that lies underneath. It's like, as an herbalist, if you develop a relationship with that herb, with that plant, it is so much more effective for you than another plant that you don't know that well. And the same is true for the ghost points. Over time, you develop this really deep relationship with them, and that becomes very powerful. So just a few more things. Many people, like I said, don't do the whole treatment in one session. They start with single points, and they can also do trinities or twos. So often, traditionally, they were done in threes, and then the last trinity is actually 4 points, because there's 13 points, not 12. And you can also do them in twos. So again, each point is your teacher. You develop their relationship with them. And some points, are more stuck on different people. So as you go through, you'll be like, this point's not a big deal for this person. It's just not, there's nothing there. The next point you might need to spend an hour on, because it's like all about that. Like the guy who I talked about earlier with the golfer's elbow. That point, by the way, I forgot to mention, is called Ghost Official. And that point is about legal problems, about like rules and regulations and laws and being oppressed. And so, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing about the 13 ghost points, as a practitioner, you really need to stand in. There's no right or wrong and no good or bad. So that's part of the way that you decipher the code. If you come in with a lot of judgment, you're going to really have some difficulty with it. Okay, so what is a follow-up treatment? After doing this level of treatment, you can't just send the person home and say, figure it out. You really need to spend time with the person after the fact. So I built into my treatments, I make them pay up front for the follow-up treatment, because it's really important. If the person is like suicidal or struggling on such a deep level, it really needs to be the next day, because you may have rocked them a little bit. Or within a week in general, with people who aren't struggling that deeply. The follow-up is about helping the person be their authentic self. So I like to use, because I'm a 5-element based person, I like to use the source points of the elements, because that's just a way to say, be you. Here's your connection to source. Let's make that stronger. So that's one thing I do. I also, again, have some Worsley 5-element background. I remove any chaotic or aggressive energy, because that can get confused with the ghost points. So it's also a form of Xie Qi. If you practice that, you'll understand that. And it's a way to clear it. We did a class on chaotic and aggressive energy for practitioners and also lay people on the Alchemy Learning Center. If you don't have that in your practice, you might want to incorporate it. And also how to do non-needle techniques with that treatment as well. If you are a practitioner of that, it's nice to teach your clients how they can do it on themselves. Okay, so obviously you're going to treat the deficiencies or the excesses in that follow-up treatment, because if you don't address some of the other physical levels, glaring physical issues, for example, pain, that person's going to have a hard time assimilating the treatment. So the other thing is to tell the client right away that it can take 3 to 6 months for their habits to change. The big change has happened, but the body and the mind isn't going to be there yet. It takes some time. It takes up to a month to even articulate what's changed. So they might think they go home and come back the next day and they're like, wait, nothing's changed. So you have to set the expectations there that this is going to be a process. This is something is going to have changed, and the rest of you needs to catch up. So, Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? All right. So the points, again, are your teacher. I already addressed this, and I'm going to move on because I'm running out of some time here. The story of the points, it's like the outline of this treatment I said was very elegant. So just to give you a general overview, because we don't have a lot of time tonight, we start with Due 26, the door to your palace. It's just called palace, but think about it. This is your door. You breathe and you eat. So what is this point as a ghost point? It's the interface. How do you interface with the world, especially after trauma? So that's where we start. Then we go through deeper and deeper levels of being hooked in until you get to the final point, which is ghost seal, which is on the tongue, or you can use yin tongue. That's about your identity. So the deepest level of a person is their identity. So that's sort of the how we outline it. And in our class that we're doing next week, we're going to really take you down that road of the journey of the ghost points. So each point is working with deeper and deeper levels. So for example, the elegance of it is one of the points is about intimacy. The next point is about guilt and shame. So what we're trying to do is get someone to have actual intimacy with themselves before we ask them to look at their own guilt and shame. So if the one didn't come before the other, it wouldn't work as well. So that's what I love about how the ghost points flow. We talked about some of these things, so I'm going to move on. We're running out of time here. I want to have time for questions. So let's end with key points that you can explore for yourself as a single ghost point treatment. And the first one, again, is Due 26. I call it the door to your palace. So how has the person changed the way they're interfacing with the world after their trauma? So if you're doing this point with a person, you can ask them that question. Or if you want to do it on yourself, ghost points can be done on yourself. I'll explain that in a minute, but that could be something you're looking at. Another point that is fairly straightforward is called ghost convincing. Now, this is about reestablishing the trust in yourself. Has that ghost caused you to doubt yourself? So lung 11 is the point. And so basically what you're going to be doing is sort of questioning, what levels of self-doubt are there, and how has that become part of the person's life? In other words, they don't trust themselves anymore. And how do you reestablish trust in yourself? It's a much longer topic. Again, I'm just going very quickly. All right, so then ghost market we talked about a little bit, and that's where we're going to end today because I love this, my favorite sort of practice point for people, because we all need this as practitioners. How do we speak about ourselves in the world? Are you able to speak well about yourself in the world, or do you denigrate yourself? So before we continue on with that thought, you can do this point on yourself. And the reason for that is that ghost points are really for obsession, as I said, not possession. Technically speaking, if you're possessed, you're stuck inside yourself and you can't even access the key. So you can't technically undo a possession, but the ghost points are for the things that you could, that fish could wriggle hard enough on that hook to fall off. And so even though it's difficult, even though it's hard, you could release your own ghost points, your own ghosts. So as an exercise, you can all practice this at home. This point is the one that you would do, and you would vibrate, and you would think about, what are your gifts for the world? What is your gift? And the idea is that we all sort of come with a gift for the world, and we have a particular nature, we have an elemental nature, we have perhaps astrological influences, whatever you think there is, but there's something unique about you. And how are you going to get your gift to the right recipients? Because every gift, there's not a gift on this planet that doesn't have a recipient that wants it. So even if you have a really low self-image, this is about reestablishing sort of some level of understanding of what's good about you. And you can see this is hard for people that have a lot of self-hatred. But, for a lot of practitioners, this is a really important exercise. It's like, okay, I hang a shingle outside my door, but what's that shingle going to say? And what am I going to write on social media? And what am I going to say to my clients? And how am I actually portraying myself? So I like to say, if you sell apples at the market, are you going to say your apples are mealy and have a lot of worms in them and expect to sell them? No. But if you were to actually talk about how delicious they are, and how, maybe the occasional worm also loves them because they're so delicious, the person who doesn't care about the worms but really cares about the taste, that's the recipient for you. And so that's kind of the level that we need to get to. So you could write that down for yourself, journal it, and, allow those emotions that you feel about it, because often we feel very uncomfortable about marketing ourselves. And, you can do this exercise many times over as a practitioner. Is probably our weakest, I would say, weakest for many of us. So that's just a way for you to begin to it. So when we teach the ghost points, we're really asking you to engage them for yourself. So that's sort of where we're going to go. I just wanted to give you a little brief introduction to the class that we're having, because we scheduled this wonderful webinar. I thought, okay, well, that's not going to be very much. It's like a little taste of the ghost points. So we decided to have another live stream next week, and we're going to offer you guys a $100 discount. So I think Jeff is putting this link up for you guys. If you want to take the class, you're welcome to. So that's next week, October 31st. And also, I just want to say that we have an apprenticeship program. It's year one is the ghost points and the 9 heart pains treatment. And that starts in January. So reach out to us on the Alchemy Learning Center if you would like to do that. And just so you know, this is one of the, due to COVID, you can be anywhere in the world, and we can talk about whether that's appropriate for you and whether you can do that. And then finally, I just want to mention the Inspired Action podcast again, where we talk about some of these things, and it's really fun, and we have a lot of fun with my co-host, Jay McElroy, who's hysterically funny. So it's entertaining, and it talks about Chinese medicine. So it's a win-win. And we're on pod 88, which is a great number. So, all right. I think that's it, Jeff.
Oh, thank you so much. We actually have a ton of questions. So let's just get right into it, if you don't mind.
Great.
All right. First question. Could you please discuss the energetic language of the Sun Simiao 13 ghost points in the context of alchemical transformation?
The energetic language. I'm not sure I understand the question. The energetic language. I honestly, I'll just riff on it. I'm not sure I understand the question, but in terms of energetics, what we're working on is there's 3 layers. There's the consciousness, there's the subconsciousness, and then there's the unconsciousness. And you can look at the physical layers, the Wei Qi, the Ying Qi, and the Yuan Qi. And so those are all kind of mapped to the same levels. And so when we're doing ghost points, we're really getting at below that consciousness level. We're looking at the deep, deep levels, like the 8 extraordinary vessels, like I said, or the divergent channels, but we're just doing it with a different method. The alchemy is really about shaking things up in a faster way. So energetically, it's a vibrational technique. So I don't know. I don't think that was what they were trying to get at. So I'm not quite sure.
Michelle, if you do want more clarification, please put it in the questions tab. Just, add a new question and, maybe add a little bit more context behind it.
Yes.
Next question. How can we distinguish clinically between obsession and profound grief when someone has lost a loved one?
It's a great question. The key factor is, are they stuck in grief? Now, I have used the grieving treatment directly after someone has died to help someone move through the grief, but that's almost like a primary channel treatment. It's not quite the same as a grieving treatment. A grieving treatment is really for someone whose loved one has been dead for some time and they have not moved through the grief. So they're stuck. Once someone's been dead for a year, Chinese say it's kind of time to move on. And they really give people a year. They don't think you should move too fast. It's a process. So you're going through a process. And once you understand the 5 levels of grief, you can see if that person's stuck in one of those levels. So we are teaching grieving in starting next year in our 2nd level of apprenticeship. So we may have a workshop coming up for that at some point.
And then how about treating chronic fatigue syndrome as a result of multiple chemical sensitivity, environmental illness, multiple sensory sensitivity, genetic detoxification issues, and just plain old poisoning?
Absolutely, positively, incredible work can be done with the ghost points, because again, you're going to want to address a lot of those things in the ways you already know how. But when you add the ghost points, there's something already disturbed that set this up. This person didn't just get here for no reason. What in them or their life experience sort of sent them down that road? That's a complicated, I don't know if that's all in one person, but it sounds like it. So we see people like this all the time in our clinic, and that's where the ghost points can really sort of get to, if you think about like undercurrents, something deeper that's just simmering underneath the surface always. It's like some agitation is just there. A little bit like those of you who do know aggressive energy, which I call chaotic energy. It's an agitation, it's heat. It's something that's, windy. And so this is like that, but it's at the deepest level, and it's always disturbing the peace of that person.
Okay. And then do you have any suggestions of books that can help somebody study more on this topic?
Well, definitely the book that we just came out with, Through the Mystery Gate. There are sort of original translations of Gehong and Sun Simiao that you could look at, but I have not found, and I plan to write a book more on the ghost points, but there is a section in Through the Mystery Gate that talks about the ghost points somewhat, but at the moment I really am focusing on teaching them, because it's not the kind of learning you're going to get a lot out of in the book. And as you read online, there's a lot written about the 13 ghost points, but there's nothing really written about how to do them. And I'm not sure it's appropriate for a book, honestly, but because it really helps to learn it from someone in person. I've discovered that over the years.
All right, let's see. Which point do you vibrate when asking, what is your gift?
This is Ren 24, CV 24.
Okay. And then somebody did ask, will this class be available later to view? And yes, all of our webinars are available immediately after. So if you stay on the screen after we end, you can just watch it right away. Also check your email 5 minutes after we end. You'll get a link. You'll also get a link to download the slides, and there'll also be some links for Leta in there as well.
And also, if you meant the class that we're teaching next week, that'll also have a replay for a week.
Oh, that's actually a really good, I didn't even think about that.
Okay, I'm not sure what they meant.
No, I think you actually, that might actually be the question. So yes, so it'll be available for view for a week after if you are taking Leta's class on the 31st.
And it will eventually be available online in the Alchemy Learning Center after we edit it and that's stuff like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple questions. So do you have any thoughts on macular degeneration?
Well, Honestly, that alone wouldn't indicate to me that the ghost points are absolutely necessary. It could be related to toxic environment, diet, all kinds of things, that might be affecting the eyes. So that alone would not, a symptom like that alone would not say to me, we have to do the ghost points. We would have to look at the whole package of what's going on for that person.
Like, kind of going a little bit further, this next person wanted to know about fibromyalgia, the chronic pain, if you had any thoughts, and then they also put in parentheses suppressed rage.
Okay, those three are definitely in the bailiwick of ghost points, because all of those have, well, especially the suppressed rage, obviously we talked a little bit about that, but the chronic fatigue and chronic pain, anything chronic like that that's really simmering under the surface often has a very big emotional component that the ghost points are very effective with.
And the next question, can you please provide some examples of the music that was used and how? And they put in parentheses, partial songs, full ones, randomly done.
Okay. Yes. So I have 20,000 songs on an iPod that I shuffle. So I've been developing this library for years. When CDs started going by the wayside, it was very easy. I would just say, bring your CD collection to me. And it was great. So that's how I do it. Nowadays, I think you can use Spotify or Pandora or some other, music streaming service and put in types of music. You really want all types of music. This is not a pretty music treatment. It can have pretty music, your typical massage music or something like that. But you really want to go the full gamut. I have punk rock, I have heavy metal, I have, grunge. I mean, you name it, it's there, and I don't hold back, So, when my kid was little, they said, Mom, adults can't listen to this music. That was their rap. So, the rap, it was definitely in there, and it definitely wasn't clean, because our trauma is not clean, and maybe it offended someone or not, but I have a little story. Once we had some music that I didn't know I'd put on there, and it was incredibly offensive, and later took it off. That's the only time I've ever censored my iPod. But the woman who happened to have the treatment right after that said that music was her life. Like, she had such an affinity with it in a negative way that really matched her trauma. So I figured it was divine DJ, whatever it was meant to be. And then I took it off. I don't need to do that to the clients, at that level.
And then somebody did want you to clarify something. So you had said something about maybe ghost official, and it was associated with the laws, rules, and legal issues.
Yes. So large intestinal 11 is called ghost official. And again, it's a puzzle. All we know from Sun Simiao is a word. This is from my, 15 to 20 years experience with learning this and studying it and doing it. But to me, that official, think of a judge on a bench. That's an official. Think of an elected official. These are the, the Supreme Court. And these are the officials. So it's about the laws. It's about the rules that we have to live by. It's about the oppression we might feel we have in particular.
All right. Well, we do have a lot more questions coming in. Let's take a couple more. I don't think there's any way humanly possible we could answer all of these.
Let's do our best.
Yes, let's try. We'll try to see how many we can answer. Give me one second here. So somebody did want to ask about the workshop and said they wouldn't be able to take it next week. Can they still sign up for it and then watch it at their convenience and get the same credits?
Yes, because I will just have to have you take the test that is going to be the online version. I'm just trying to follow NCC AOM guidelines, but yes, you can do that. If you reach out to me and just explain that, for sure.
Perfect. And then can you explain which points were used for the grief treatment?
Oh, there's many of them. There's, God, I don't even remember. There's probably more than 13. So that's a much longer topic. So we'll have to talk about that and
a future
do another
webinar.
class,
Yes.
Another webinar.
Yes.
I'd love to do that webinar, actually.
All right. Sounds good. We now know what we're doing next time.
Okay, good.
All right, let's do 2 more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. If all you have are 90-minute sessions, would you start with 2 or 3 paired points that make sense and then ground the CF with sources?
That's a great idea. And I would just say for a beginner, just the first trinity would be all I would start out with. I probably wouldn't touch the other points until you really start to understand what you're doing, because again, there's a little bit of that Pandora's box as you go deeper and deeper. So I really like the first 3 points, and I already gave you that first point. So, you can look it up, but it's not hard to find, but maybe come to the class, just to get a little bit more familiarity if you want to try to do this on your own. But again, I developed the apprenticeship because it is hard to do on your own. The current apprenticeship group is really, they're working really hard. And I think they're really grateful to have someone hold their hand. And I had a teacher who was helping me, and Jeffrey helped me. And so it's just, it's a long process to learn how to do this. So I would start simple, very simple.
All right. Well, the last question, looks like a few people wanted to know about it. So they want to know, how would you vibrate a point? Is that something you can describe right now?
Right. So
do you want me to make your screen larger?
Oh, there you go. Okay. So there's different vibrational techniques. So if you're going to be doing or needling, you can be needling, or you can be doing your needle. So if you're doing like an 8 extra point, you're going to want to feel like the needle is touching like the bottom of the ocean, like seaweed moving. So that vibration is slower. It's like you're not going for the big shakeup. You're going for like, let's gently get you to do a little shifting. So that would be an 8 extraordinary vessel kind of idea. And the divergence is similar in that, it's not like a vigorous type of thing, but it's a little more vigorous. It's a little more like, let's dredge out some gunk from the joints, for example. And so again, it's going to have sort of a vibrational technique, but the fastest vibrational technique is alchemy, because you're really asking for that transmutational process. And so, you don't want to actually look like this, because that is all the activities on the top. So you might remember from what I was just talking about, the vibration is underneath. So it's definitely a technique that takes time to develop. And if you're doing it with needles, again, it's gonna, you could be going like this very fast, but that's not what we're talking about. It has to be energetically vibrating, which again, it takes time to learn.
Well, I think that is all of our time for tonight. We cannot thank you enough. So everybody, please take a look at this upcoming seminar that Leta is going to be teaching. I'm going to throw the link back into the chat one more time for you all. We just want to thank you. It was really incredible information, and everybody really, really enjoyed themselves. And clearly we have a lot of questions that didn't get answered. So I do apologize to anybody who didn't get their questions answered. Attend the workshop and you will be able to.
And you're welcome to email me. I think maybe you put my email up, but if you haven't, it's Leta@alchemylearningcenter.com, or alchemyhealingcenter.com also works. Email me anytime.
All right, I'm putting there we go. So your email address is in the chat. So I just want to let everybody know. So we actually have a bunch of things coming up in the near future. So if you guys are registered for the Pacific Symposium, which is happening next weekend, we're offering 3 free PDA classes. So on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, there's an opportunity during the lunch break to earn a free PDA. On Thursday, it will be with Whitfield Reeves talking about treating the core muscles. On Friday, it's going to be Michelle Gellis talking about facial cupping and gua sha. And then on Saturday, it's going to be Dr. John Chen talking about Chinese herbal updates in the treatment of COVID and the UCLA UCSD trials. So we have a lot of exciting stuff happening. And then our next webinar that's going to be happening on this platform will be on November the 4th, also featuring Whitfield Reeves. And it will be Acupuncture Sports Medicine Beyond What You Learn in School. Sorry, that's a lot of words to say, but we are just so excited because we have so many exciting things happening. Again, I want to thank Leta. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was ours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Bye,